Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the book of Job, Sefer Eov. We are about to study chapter 23. In Eov 23, Eov is responding to Eliphaz's doubling down, or more accurately, tripling down on uh, on um, on Eov's supposed guilt, accusing Eov of having been guilty as a judge, of having through dishonest judgments enriched himself and taken advantage of the poor. This is an entirely imagined history of Eov's life, which we know is not true, but it was invented by Eliphaz and his friends in order to explain why Eov is suffering. Eov, at this point, until this point, Eov has been still trying to beg his friends to look at him properly, to give him the benefit of the doubt, to listen to what he's actually saying. By now, we get the sense in this chapter that Eov has given up completely on convincing his friends of anything. He sees that they are just too stuck in their understanding of the world to actually be able to raise themselves out of that kind of approach. So instead, Eov now turns his attention towards God, and God only. Vayan Eov Vayomar, and Eov responds to Eliphaz and says as follows: Gam hayom mirisichi. Today, again and now, my speech is bitter. Yadi kavda al anchasi. My arm is weighed down. In other words, my strength. An arm is a representation of his strength. It's just weighed down from all of my crying, all of my moaning. In other words, I am thoroughly exhausted from this arguing. Mi yitain yodati v'emsa'eu. If only I had the knowledge, right, that I could go and find him with a capital H, God. Avo at techunaso, and I could go up to God's place where he rests, where he lives, and speak with him directly. I'm tired. I'm too tired of this arguing back and forth with my friends. I want to go just talk straight to God himself. If only I knew how. And if I would place my case in front of him. And all of my arguments, I would fill my mouth. I would tell God all of the things, all of my complaints, all of my questions. I would put them right to God. And I know, right, I would learn from him, because he would answer me. He would answer me with words, with actual answers, with answers that mean something, not this nonsense I'm hearing from my friends, but I would hear from God himself. And I would understand what he's telling me, because what he would tell me would make sense. Would he come back at me and argue with me with strength and punishments? Of course not. I know he won't, because I know that I'm innocent. Not unlike the people here that they believe that I'm guilty. Lo ahu yasim bi. Right? I know for sure that definitely he would not come at me, right? Would come against me. Sham yashar nochach imo. There, a yashar, an upright person, will stand upright with God, because God will justify him. God will say, yes, you are innocent. Va'afal tolanetzach, and I will be saved forever. I will find refuge forever, mishofti, from the one who is judging me, right? Hen kedem eheloch ve'einenu. However, nonetheless, if only I could go before God. However, in this real world, in this world here, kedem eheloch, I can go to the east ve'einenu, and I can't find them. V'achar, and I turn back, or literally here, back is referring to the west. V'lo avinlo, and I don't understand God. Again, Eov is emphasizing what he wants is answers. What he wants more than anything is an explanation. It's so much easier to handle suffering, even though, of course, suffering is awful, is terrible, but at least I could understand what's happening. Smol ba'asoso, if I turn to the left, right? Ba'asoso velo achaz, right? Even though, right, I turn to the left and he has created it, but I cannot grasp it. I cannot grasp what's happening. I see the world that God made when I look around me, but I can't grasp what it means. What's the point? Yatof yamin velo ereh. And if I turn to the right, right? This is probably meaning, he said east and west before, right and left probably refers to north and south, right? But if I turn to the right, which here presumably means to the south, right? He's hidden and I cannot see him. Yatov, he is wrapped, he is enclosed, he is enveloped and or hidden. Kiyoda derech, because he knows, right? He knows the way that is with me. He knows the path that I am on. B'chonani kazohavetze. In other words, Eliphaz just said in the last chapter in 22 that I am claiming that God doesn't know my ways because he's living up in the heavens and he's blocked by the clouds and he doesn't care about me. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. God knows my ways. But he knows, right? B'chonani, when I cry out, kazav eitzeh, he knows that I would, if when I approach God and I beg God, right? I know, and God searches me out and checks me out, that I would be considered as pure as gold. Ba'ashuro achazoragli. On his path is the path that my legs have went. That I have always been going on the path of God. Not like you're claiming that I was unjust and that I had made people suffer because of my judgments. No, the opposite. I have been walking the path of God. You told me I should walk the path of God. I have been. Darko shamarti v'lo'at. Right? I have always kept the way of God. I have never turned away from keeping the way of God. Mitzvahs sifasav, the commandments of God's lips. V'lo amish, I have not changed from them. I have not deviated from them. Mechuki tzofanti imrei piv, right? I have hidden away like a person puts away something that's valuable, right? His laws. I have kept his rules like they were valuable. The words of God. I've always kept them. Those were the gold for me. And again, this is a response to what Eliphaz was saying, that what should be treasured for you is not gold and wealth, but you should treasure your relationship with God. And Eov is saying that I did, and I have always been that way. V'hu ve'echad umi yeshivenu. He is unique. He is unique and special in such a way. God is different from us. God is completely different from us. And Eov is starting to get that, explain to us the difference between him and the friends. Why is it that his friends are led astray? Because although everyone agrees God is great, everyone agrees that God is just. The question is, though, Eov is stating that God is unique in such a way that we cannot claim to understand his justice. Right? You, Eliphaz, are making that error, and that error leads you down the wrong path. That error is that, yes, God is great, but you think that his sense of justice is the same as yours, and therefore you conclude that I must be a sinner because I'm suffering. But mi yeshivenu, who can understand him? Who can just talk to God? We can't do that. In other words, he was saying, if only I could, I know he would justify me. He would say that I'm being honest, right? But I can't. V'nafsho ivso vayoas, right? Whatever God desires is what he does. In a more Maimonidean way, what he's saying is that God's will is the same thing as his action. It's all one. It's all the same. Ki yashlim chuki b'chaheinu rabosimo, because he will bring my chok. This is the best translation I've seen for this is my term. In other words, that which was set out for me in this world, this time that I was set out, he will fill that time. V'chaheinu rabosimo. But he has so many more things to give out. In other words, good, bad, and anything in between. Terms that he gives to people, what your lot is, what your lot is. He will fill that out for me, but he has so much more than just me, just the little me. Al kain, therefore, mi panov ebohel, from before him I am terrified. Esponein ve'efchad mimenu. When I think about God, I am so afraid. So on the one hand, Eov is stating, I wish I could talk to him. I wish I could explain to him. I wish I could hear his explanation to me. On the other hand, I know that I can't. I know that I can't approach him. I know that I can't understand him. So I am so afraid because I can't. I can never access that knowledge. I'll never be able to understand how God works and why I'm suffering so. The El Herach Libi. It is God that made my heart soft. In other words, that made me feel the way I feel right now, the exhaustion, that I feel right now. V'shadai hevilani, it is God who has terrified me. Ki, and this is the verse 17, the last verse in this chapter. Ki lo nitzmati mipnei choshech. The way Rashi, Ralbag, and most of the commentaries understand this, because he did not make me die before all of this darkness occurred. In other words, he's saying, I wish I would have died before this happened, so I wouldn't have to live through this terrible suffering. But he did not make me die. Another way of understanding this, I think it's Ibn Ezra says, is that because I remember Eov, one of his first wishes when he started suffering was, why even be born in the first place if one is going to be born into a life of suffering, right? So, and God did not make me die before that. Umi ponai kisa ofel. And then from before me, he would have at least, the darkness would have been concealed from me, right? Or that could have happened. So those are two ways. The third way to understand this is really the mitzudos. In other words, I did not know any suffering. Before this happened, I was not aware. I did not know. Of course, Eov knew there was such a thing as suffering, but he had no idea what it was like. He had no idea what it meant, what suffering meant. And now that it came upon me, right, that's how God made me faint-hearted, which goes back to the previous verse. El hirachli bi, God made me soft, made me terrified, right? How? Because before, in my whole life, I lived a life of luxury. I had no idea that such things could happen, but now I do. So those are three ways to understand this last verse, 17. This concludes chapter 23 of the book of Eov. Thank you so much for studying this chapter with me. And thank you so much for those of you who have been studying with me for these past several years. It's been my privilege to teach the words of the prophets. I'm looking forward to studying chapter 24 with you, and of course the rest of this book of Eov. Have a wonderful day.